Hello, hello, my organizational communication class. Today I am going to talk about organizational management structures. And this is a really important lecture. Please take the time to take some notes. A lot of the things I'm going to talk about have a brief summary on our Canvas page, but this, of course, is going to get more into the weeds and get a lot more detail, which I can't wait to tell you about some of these exciting things about organizational management structures. Woohoo! I'm really pumping it up, but it's probably not that interesting. I don't know. You'll have to tell me what you think. Mhm. Okay, I can't wait to hear. So in our class, the way I've designed our class is that we are using motion pictures, films, and movies to kind of dive into uh, some of the themes that we're studying. And the very first movie report is about structure, hierarchies, and the way relationships, formal and informal communication, and trying to create a creative expression, a map that explores using management structures. And when you make your map, I'll expect the map to kind of include the visual metaphor of the structure that you're trying to represent. So as I go through this lecture and I talk about the history of management structures and all of the different styles, what I really want you to do is listen for, I will add in the metaphor that goes with them that works best. So that will help guide you when you start watching your movie and designing a map for it. All right. So let's see. Of course, we have to start at the very beginning. A very good place to start. Uh, we're going to talk about classical management to start with and go into kind of this industrial revolution and the shift in historical change that we went through with the aventation of machinery and factories and a society that now had electricity and steam engines and power, which started speeding things up. Production and the way we can move, things started moving faster. And as soon as we get into this kind of industrial revolution period, we go from the way things are produced and the way that we do business being more um, they were smaller units of people. This is really important to kind of understand because we want to understand how the shift was happened, why the shift in focusing on this, what's happening when we get into a factory or setting like that versus the an artesian kind of artesian, meaning like the artesian skill, or that someone is from the time they're very young raised to have a skill, and that's usually family structures that were part of how you had apprenticeships or family structures and farms. These type of things were more cultivated on a much smaller scale, right? So then when we get the Industrial Revolution coming in and we start bringing in many more people to manage machines. And then not only are we getting people in larger groups working together, these people are coming from all different kinds of families into a job. And we see the decline of that artesian apprentice style of business to these larger groups. So not only are these people like gathering in larger skills, they're moving at a much faster pace. And now we also have people working with machines, like alongside machines, right? We have the assembly lines and managing weavings or looms or things like that are starting to happen. And that means that we need some rules. How are we going to manage all these people? And we have three people that we put under the umbrella of classical management, even though it's Henry Farrell who really coins classical management. We first start out with Max Weber, and Max Weber is someone who was like really concerned about the structure of a workplace with this many people, all these different people and all these machines. What is the structure? What is we really needing to make that work? And so Max Weber wants the most effective, he wants the most efficient, and he wants to understand also how to create longevity or growth within a business. And Max Weber is best known for coining the term bureaucracy. So you can see he wants things to be efficient, he wants things to be effective, he wants this kind of structure, long-term structure. So when he was doing his research at the in this industrial revolution to kind of problem solve how are we going to deal with these shifts and changes to the workplace, he went to what he considered the most efficient and effective organization, which was he coined the Persian Army. He said the Persian Army is the gold standard for efficiency, and we're going to look over and see what they're doing and take those principles and now applying to business. If you have any experience with military or why our military structures and corporation structures seem so similar, let's look to Max Weber, who first made the connection of efficiency and hierarchies and that that kind of box line graph of this is the CEO, and then we have this board of directors, and we have management structures, and then we have those workers, and we have different people in different positions, which most organizations or corporations today, even at the university level, you can find those a traditional box line kind of graphs. I don't have one here on my desk to show you. Uh, but if we think about the way it kind of comes out and does this, it kind of has a pyramid. So if you're in your movie report for me, you might think about making a pyramid structure or some type of box line type of structure for how communication is more in this kind of classical management. And when you think about all those boxes lined up there, that is supposed to look the reason why Max Weber created that kind of structure look to organize these large peoples and to have a better view of what's going on was this word bureaucracy comes from the word bureau or a dresser, where you hold your clothes, you know, with drawers in it. And that's kind of what that's modeled after. Ooh, maybe some of you will do a dresser image. I'm so curious what will happen. Okay. So not only did he look at the Persian army for effectiveness and efficiency, he also was like, well, who's been around for a long time that's had a massive structure to it? And he decided to look to the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church was well established by this point, had been around for uh, a minute or two, hundreds of years, and it seemed to still contain the same structure. So that was also what he was modeling, uh, the flow of and hierarchies and this formal way that communication, and you have the Pope and the bishops and the cardinals, and then you have all the people who come to the church to be a part of that organization. So, or that religious institution. So, again, if you feel like you've ever been a part or looked into the window of a church, especially the Catholic Church, but this is, we can see it echoed in a lot of different religious structures, that there's this kind of hierarchy of powers. And then you go to work and you're like, why does this feel familiar? Well, let's blame Max Weber for that, okay? Or not blame, but let's look to Max Weber for that connection. Okay, so what is happening in what Max Weber was really hoping for when he created his management structure, which he coined industrial management. That was his term. Even though the industrial management term we don't really use, we use more classical management. Um, and Max Weber is around the same time as Henry Farrell, so we see why classical management becomes kind of the umbrella here that we're using. But he called it industrial management, and he said he really had some really important beliefs that he was using here, and outcomes that he wanted. First of all, he really wanted things to have a legal structure. He wanted rules and legalities and standardization, almost like a government structure of regulation. And the rationality for this was because of the shift and change from these family groups, apprentice groups, farms that were really run. You got your position because you were born into it. So this kind of nepotism, and he didn't believe that an industrial workplace, industrial management, should be based on nepotism. It should be based on we want the best employee with the best skill for the job. And he also really felt like things that it should be based, your job should be based on your performance. It should be based, and you should get paid, and you should get paid actually well for having a skill and a job that you are efficient and effective on. And that was because you're not tied to a family unit, and that's why you're getting the job. You are hired into the industry. That meant that we needed to keep you. It's not just because we all are one family and that's why you're going to keep this job. There could be a competitive reason for you to join a different organization. So fair pay was part of Max Weber's belief structure. Uh, and he also felt like your job position, that you should have some authority or expertise that you bring to that job position to do the best you can on it. Let's see, is there anything? I think that basically. Oh, there's one more thing about that Max Weber that I think is so interesting, that here's where we're first starting to get that break and division, that you have a job and you go to work and then you leave your job, clock out, and then you go home, and your life and your work should be separate. And there was kind of this is where we see the first evolution or evolving of this idea that work and life are two separate things. How do you balance that? I don't know. And of course, now we have a very popular show on Apple TV called Severance, which is all about how do you keep those separate, and the sci-fi kind of element of them playing around with this first idea that came out of the Industrial Revolution. Remember, like piecework and all those artesian skills, those were done in the home. Uh, or you basically lived where you worked. So this idea that you go to a factory to do your job and then you leave. I wonder if any of your movies will play around with this idea. I think it's a really interesting idea to see if you can find some subtleties in your movie on the idea of, is work and life separate, or are they one thing? Is your work your identity? Is that how you know who you are? All right. So once we are moving out of Max Weber's bureaucracy philosophies, and that box line, we're still in the same idea of classical management, but we have another person that has made a huge influence. These are the granddaddies of classical management, and this is Frederick Taylor. So Frederick Taylor has a completely different idea about how to make that factory and our bureaucracy a well-oiled machine. How are we going to bring all these people together. Um, so yeah, so was we and this idea of course we're going to get this metaphor that work is and is a workplace should be a well-oiled machine is a very industrial revolution term because of these new machines that we were trying to run and keep running for that productivity. Uh, so Frederick Taylor says, actually, Matt, actually, we need to zoom in. So Max Weber is zoomed out. I'm going to look at the organization as a whole and all the pieces of it. But now I'm going to zoom in on a single worker. And what is happening in, what is that one single worker doing that makes them good at their job or not good at their job? But Matt, he would watch. And he was really into this kind of more I'm going to get my binoculars and I want to look at every single minutia and minute of the day. And what is each worker doing every single minute? What is their motions that they do? Especially if I'm looking at someone who's really, really good at he timed people. How long did it take him to do that job? How long did what was their motions? He would watch the motion of the person as they did the job and what was the most efficient way. Where were they wasting time, right? We have a very monochronic way of examining the workplace of being that efficiency connected to time. So he did motion studies, he timed people, and he decided the best way to make this well-oiled machine with people is to standardize movement and standardize a job. So when someone's trained in a job, they were trained by the way they moved and how much time it would take. Okay, just for those of you who chose Elf, maybe, or are going to choose Elf, my favorite scene when Elf is making his etch a sketches and he has a piece. He has to make a certain number of them in a certain amount of time, and they're timing him, and the elf with the what quota he should be at. That's a very Frederick Taylor moment of we're going to um, we're going to create the most efficient. There's one right way to do it. We're going to standardize it and then copy. So each person coming into a role, it kind of feels like when you come into a role, you are a cog in a machine. And just like if I install something into a machine, I expect it to do the role I give it and run smoothly and efficiency and exactly the same way every time. Now people are like cogs in machines. Okay. For this means that we are really seeing from Max Weber and this bureaucracy into Frederick Taylor, and this machine has to be well oiled. All the communication is very formalized, it's very top down uh, approach to it. Then okay, wait, I have two more things to say about Frederick Taylor before I move to Henry Farrell. Farrell, French name, so excuse me while I stumble over his last name. Uh, Frederick Taylor is also really saying that people are motivated by money. We saw that with Max Weber as well, that basically money is the reward that people need to be motivated to be a part of this group, right? Fair pay for what you've done. But with Frederick Taylor, he's going to say, like, that piecemeal, like, oh, if we decide this is the most efficient way to make our etch a sketches, boom, 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 uh, and someone follows that rule, they should be able to make this quota by this night, and pay becomes kind of a piece pay based on your efficiency. And that should motivate you to do the best that you can do. We're just in classical management. This video is also going to cover human relations, human resources, and system theory. So you can see that these important things, these bricks that we're laying down to understand classical management, when we move into the other theories, we want to see how we start changing our belief structures around this. But at this point, this is the belief structure. Okay, Henry Farrell. Uh, so I mentioned before, he's classical management. He is kind of got this administrative science that he's approaching uh, his way to make that well-oiled machine. Uh, so his here's where he's also in this belief that work and life are separate, and we need to harmonize the compliance of workers. We need to start harmonizing, and that means that you need managers in charge, and they need to be watching and looking at their group, and we need a commander, we need a leader. And part of that leading is you need to he's if this is classical management and this is an administrative science, then managers and leaders and commanders, they need to have a goal. They need to have a plan and a goal, and they need to watch all their workers to make sure they are leading their workers through their day or night. Um, and even though where Taylor says zoom in and get really into the minutia of each little movement, Henry Farrell's like, no, let's back that up. Let's back that up a little. Uh, I need you to reach this goal, but how you reach it, you need to be a little bit more involved in that process. And so here's where we're going to get managers who are communicating. This is where we need to go. But then there's a little bit more hands off in how and getting out of the weeds and details of that, of how we're going to get there. And so he really believed that if you want to get a harmonized work group and compliance with your people, you need to give them a little bit of you need to give them a little bit of room for how they get to the goal. But they even though they need to get to the goal. So you might say that here the end is important. We need to define the end, and the means of how we get to that end, there's a little bit of wiggle room there for the workers. Okay, so Max Weber, Frederick Taylor, Henry Farrell, classical management. Um, this, I would say classical management is kind of, uh, it's definitely has a bigger hierarchy. There's a division of labor that's really defined. You stay in your lane. There's that hierarchy, box line, organizational management charts that we still kind of see today. Um, there's a centralized authority. There's a commander. There's someone in charge, and and communication moves from the top down. Those are the things that we're going to kind of see as part of a classical management. How much of that is still happening today? Anyone? Okay, get back to me on that. I can't wait to hear about how that might still be showing up today. That would be so nice to hear about that. Um, okay, all of you have so much experience that you come to the class with. It's really exciting when we can start getting into these topics. Da, 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 da. Oh, where are we now? Okay, so let's move beyond into the turn of the century, not this latest one, but from the 1800s to the 1900s as we move into the 1900s and the 1920s and we're deep into the Industrial Revolution, and we're kind of moving towards, we move through a world war here. All these things start changing and shifting our global society. We're getting used to speed. We're flying around now. There's all different kinds of ways transportation has shifted and changed. Been through a pandemic at this point, and so as we are as people, as we shift and change, the way we approach the workplace starts changing. And this is where we're going to get into human relations and human resources a bit later, after post World War II into the 60s. We're really going to see human resources start to blow up, the 1960s. So, Human Relations by Douglas McGregor. Here we're going to, let's see, I'm looking. Douglas McGregor. Oh, and it looks like we also have Elton Mayo here for Human Relations. So at this point, we're really have management has developed a very strong belief structure, which is sometimes still around today, that workers are lazy. They're lazy, they're gullible, they're easily manipulated, they're not very trustworthy. And so when a manager approaches a work group, there needs to be ways to reward them. They need carrots, they need sticks, they need punishment, they need to be motivated. And this is a very traditional management style that really were shaping how we were, how how communication was happening in the workplace. And managers believed they had to control their workers. I have to control you. I have to control you because you are gullible and lazy. And if I don't control you, nothing would get done. Um, and so there was a workers started developing a lot of resistance, and there were a lot of poor results because if you don't feel like you have any value to bring, why would you even try? Been there, done that. And so Douglas McGregor says no. There's a quality to being human, and that is that humans want to be valued. They want to give their value. They want to have purpose. And work is natural. It's a natural thing about being human. Humans need to work, they want to work. And this is also coming in out of the Great Depression, where we had a lot of unemployment and people, we saw a depressed place because people couldn't work. And this is where we're getting Maslow's hierarchy of needs being developed out of the Industrial Revolution and the Great Depression, where we started to see that people do have needs. And part of that self belonging need or that self esteem need is this need to be involved. And so, if we want to tap into the full potential of our workers, uh, we need to go Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We need to pull them up into self esteem, and self actualization actually becomes a pivotal thing about purpose. What is someone's purpose, and what are they giving, and are they being recognized for that? So, McGregor's theory Y, like the letter Y, like theory X, theory Y, uh, is that people want responsibility, people want to be creative, and they want to be included. And if you can tap into this, you will get the highest potential, and you will get the most compliance, you'll get the best results, all of these things. So what McGregor did, he was a social scientist, which is why he was really tapped into this idea of a need to be fulfilled and being better and societies being better. So, as a social scientist, he approached the workplace not with this data, not times and charts and Excel spreadsheets, right? Like we're not worried about the spreadsheet. We're worried about feelings. Nothing more than feelings. How do my workers feel? So he went into his research in a much more qualitative way. This is an ethnography approach where I'm going to now, almost like an anthropologist, I'm going to sit and watch the workplace. And I'm kind of curious about the workplace. What is going on? How are people uh, what is their environment like? What is the space like? What is the flow of communication? And he starts talking to people and interviewing them and and observing what's going on. Not like Taylor with his binoculars with the minutia of every single flick of the wrist. No, he's like, I'm curious about what's the overall culture of this workplace. And his experiments to, which is called the Hawthorne experiment, and sometimes in the field of organizational management and organizational communication, the Hawthorne experiment is kind of a term that is used. And the Hawthorne experiment that he did, Hawthorne is the name of the, I think, actually, I'm not quite sure, the factory or the city he did this experiment in, but he worked in a factory. We'll just say it's the factory for now. Sorry for those people who are really high experts on this out there in the world. Um, uh, the Hawthorne experiment is where he altered lighting and rest breaks with different groups of workers. He created poor lighting, better lighting. He increased rest breaks or decreased. He made some like really short for contrast. There's a lot of criticism about the Hawthorne experiment that it wasn't really using scientific method the way and it wasn't approached really accurately. And would it still hold up? There's a lot of questions about that. But it did have the experiment and his findings did have a huge impact that we now call the School of Human Relations. So it did whether the experiment was sound or not as a scientific experiment, it did have an impact. And so, like most some scientific experiences, we always have to think about that. I just having my mind went to all the different ones that were not well done. Okay, so he noticed that the lighting didn't really make a difference if it was poor lighting or good lighting or rest breaks. The length of them didn't seem to have that big of an impact on whether the efficiency went up. And he was really like kind of confused. Like, I keep changing all these environmental factors. Then I go in and I talk to people and interview them, and I'm not, and everyone's productivity is going up. And then he's like, oh, wait, I'm the thing that has changed. I'm talking to people. Asking them how they feel. I'm asking them about their preferences and how and things like that. And so it was the self-disclosure and it was the involvement and the listening and being interested in people and their jobs that was creating productivity in the workplace. And so here's where we get this um, recommendation that managers communication needs to come towards managers, not just top down, but now we need bottom up uh, communication. And managers, when they're communicating, they should be interested, they should be friendly, they should be concerned and curious, and they should be treating their workers as individuals, right? Remember how I started this? We're like, workers are lazy and they need to be rewarded or punished. We need carrots and sticks. Nope. He's like, if you are friendly and you treat people as individuals and as if they matter and that they have a contribution and you're curious about their life, that's the key. Um, so feed, so that, so not only do managers need to change how they perceive their workers, how they communicate with their workers, now we also need feedback from the workers up. We They need to be involved in decisions about their workplace and the lighting and the rest breaks. And he also disproved, here's where we get the first disproving that money is connected to motivation. Because when he was talking and doing his experiments, everyone was doing better at their job. They were showing up. There was less calling, less no shows. All this stuff was started happening, but the money did not increase. Rewards did not increase. What increased was the communication and the involvement of him in these interviews that he was conducting and asking people every day how they were. Uh, so we want communication up so we can be better managers, better leaders, and do a better job and show up for our workers the way they need us. And that's where we're going to get this like top communication now flowing both ways. Uh, and this is all of the research that we're getting here from Elton Mayo and Douglas McGregor in all of these kind of findings that's called human relations. But human relations is just a small bridge between our classical management and human resources, and then we'll talk about system theory. As we go into human resources, and this is coming in the 1960s, and if you decide to do a human resources type of map for your movie report, I'm expecting this to look more like a road map, or the way that we have satellite views of our streets and cities. What's our satellite view of the communication flow of an organization? Because human resources are now interested in people are our resources, meaning that if I get hired into an organization, I am hired because I am a valuable resource and I have something to contribute to this. And human resources, how do I want to say this? We are going to start to see that our corporation is an entity, it's its own universe. And if it's its own entity, it has to have its own core values. It has to have its own mission statement as an organization. And then the people that we allow in to work for this organization should share in our mission statement. uh, they should share in our core values. And so this is where you start seeing interviews happening that are much more behavioral style interviews. I want to hire you because you belong in this organization and you fit where we're going and what we need. And there's this organizations or corporations that have this kind of human resource approach to management. They are their own brand, and they now start marketing and projecting their brand, and they have their own persona. This is things like Apple, or Mac, and we see, or Netflix, Pixar, Nike, Patagonia, LL Bean, Land's End, I don't know, like anything that you can name. It has its kind of, when you have that label on your clothing, Nike, Adidas, it kind of comes with its own branding to it. And then if you work for that organization, if you join that organization, you are agreeing to be a part of that world. And you will, that belief structure, that mission statement, those core values, employees should share in the values of the organization. And we're not going to get to this right now. We're going to get to this later, but because of human resources, they develop their own rules, their own laws, and you can uh, hold on a second. I'm just seeing some um, their own laws and that are different than the government laws, right? They're going to be much more restrictive. And so, like, we don't have in the United States of America, uh, there's no criminal law for bullying, as an example. There's different types of things that bullying might overlap with that we could use that, but there's no bullying law per se. But an organization can have a rule about bullying, and you can lose your job if you violate a human resource, what human resource has identified as bullying. Um, so you can see how human resources is its own kind of like legal organization. And because it has such legalities to it, in modern day kind of systems, that means that sometimes organizations will have a separate office called an ombuds office. And an ombuds office is one where you can come to without the legalities of human resources to work out conflicts or um, different problems that the human beings might be having with each other in a workplace in this kind of confidential place that is different than what's happening when you come to human resources. That's just something to think about. So part of the job for human resources is to uphold and be loyal to the brand. There is a lot of pressure to be upheld, and you might get a lot of swag. You might get employee discounts at the Nike store because you are the brand now when you join organizations under the human resource belief system. The reality TV show Undercover Boss is very much living under the umbrella of human resources, right? We have the CEO of a company who now goes in and does the job, all the underlining jobs to learn about those jobs, learn about the people and value the people who do those jobs. And then those people are the people that are celebrated at the end who find out who was the undercover, and they're given like little scholarships or things, special trainings or promotions, are the people that were doing these underlining these non the jobs that are not often celebrated on a daily basis, but uh they uphold the brand. They love their job. They are always looking how to be better at it because they believe in the corporation. Those are the ones that are usually held up. Very human resources. Okay. Uh, let's see. Where are we now? I'm so glad to make this video for you all. We're getting close here. We've gone through, I'm looking at my notes here. We've gone through uh classical management and our granddaddies of that, our grandpas of Frederick Taylor, Henry Farrell, and Ed Max Weber, and then we went through human relations with Elton Mayo and Douglas McGregor, and then we went through human resources. Uh, nice stuff. Now let's talk about system theory. Okay. So organizations as systems is system theory. I have a lot to say about this one. This is kind of where we're at now. We are in a surge of organizations as systems. And even though there is also a kind of a subgroup to system theory about team management, and this is why in your current studies, you've been learning a lot about team dynamics and stuff because it is a kind of a sub management structure to system theory. So, when we talk about organizations or corporations, whatever it is we're looking at as a system, we're in the belief structure that that system is a living, breathing, biological organization. And it breathes and exhales, it expands and contracts as a whole unit. It is one whole living unit. And there is nothing in that organization that is separate from the other one. So if you decide to do your movie report as an organization, as a system, I'm looking at you inside out to system people. I might expect this considering it takes place in the brain as a organizational system. It's already using the metaphor of biology, uh, our neuroscience biology, um, that uh, we want to now look at organizations as a whole. And we want to see them as an ecosystem. Or a body, or as a single body, or an ecosystem. Anything that has this kind of biology approach is when you're doing system theory correctly. So I don't want to see any road maps in a system theory map. I want to see something like the water cycle or the coral reef or the human body. I don't know. I just need to see something a lot more connected to an ecosystem or biology piece to it, or a cell, even one single cell. I'll take that with our little mitochondrias and other parts that make up the cell. Any biologists out there to help us out with this? All right, so the belief system in here is that the system is greater than the sum of its parts. That's a kind of a cliche when something is greater than the sum of its parts. That's a really underlining belief of system theory. Um, Even though we might have separate pieces to it, um, it is the system is because of those separate systems. And if we cut out one single element of it, it would be a complete collapse of the system. It'd be a complete collapse. That we are working, we are efficient, we are productive, we are successful because of those little parts that make up the greater thing. Think of like a spider web, like how you could just take out one little thing of the and the whole collapse of the spider web collapses without that one thread in it, right? That's kind of when we think. And so system theory says that because we are greater because of our parts, that means that we are a process. A process. Actually, my daughter got an internship at Hewlett Packard. And she was telling me what her job in her internship over the 4 months she was there was to look at one part that was being made at their factory, um, an inkjet. I don't even remember what it was. She was looking at one part, probably a chip for an inkjet, but she was tasked with what is the process and to map out the process and every single unit in the organization that had any involvement in that final product. Not just the assembly line of the technical piece of making it, but who were all the other departments involved in the making of that. And she made a whole processy style map of the process of making that and which parts of the organization. So if you're looking at your movie, since we're doing this with movies, and you look at the whole unit of the movie and what the goal of the movie is, what is happening, what were all the involvements in that made it work? So the subs the subsystems, the different how are accountants a part of it, and the accounting department, and the or how are the administrative assistants part of the system, right? We're going to say that nothing doesn't have value. Um, so we have, if it's a process, what are the inputs? And we think of it as a circle and out, and then what is that output? And what is the process that's happening throughout that? How does it all fit together? Maybe like a puzzle too. I mean, it's not a biological piece, but a puzzle pieces might be an interesting way to think about this. Like the puzzle isn't complete unless you have every puzzle piece. How does it all fit together? And this also values teams. It's going to value a variety of knowledge and perspectives. When we look at what Pixar does, where they have this output of this movie, and what you have storytellers and writers, but you have these animators, but then they also bring in all these experts, right? To kind of understand it. Brené Brown was an essential consultant on Inside Out 2, 1, when they were dealing with the basic emotions of guilt and blame and shame and sadness and joy. And Brené Brown's work and on shame and grief became essential pieces to how they built that movie. Right? It wasn't just writers, and they do that all the time with all their movies. They are really interested in the whole experience and the way that Pixar designs its conference rooms to not have that all the authority is squashed, sitting around a round table, not a long conference table, and that nobody is sitting in an order of hierarchies. That's a really important part of the way Pixar designs space. And also, there's this idea of transparency at Pixar where they have a lot of windows on their offices, and they have centralized, instead of centralized management, it's social spaces that are the architectural design, social spaces where even if you're the CEO of the company or the director of the movie, you have to use the same social space as anyone else, from even the janitor in the organization. There's no such thing as, they're really trying to do away with the hierarchy, and everyone should have access to everyone else. Communication now is flowing in this kind of complex, multiple direction way. Uh, so if we think about that classical management box line coming down, actually when I see like at university systems that have a box line kind of way to organize the schools and the deans and all that, it, even though it has it has relevancy, and then they bring in a human resource style, which is much more of a roadmap where communication is flowing differently. I often think, don't you need two maps? Don't you need two different ways to kind of understand this? What are the ways to think about how communication is flowing if you have this really strict hierarchical classic style, very traditional, and then you're trying to infuse this human resources style. But as we get more into, we're in a much more modern wave of system theory. uh, Boy, do we need some reorganization, or don't we? Oh my gosh, I'm gonna lose my job. Shh, don't tell. People in power like to stay in power, right? Okay. Not always, not always. We've got some people out there who still see the importance of cycling power. Okay. Because okay, so let's talk about how does system theory work in some of the ways managers can, or leaders are emerging out of this system. We're going to want feedback loops. So it's this constant perception checking that's happening about, like, they have this intern come in, someone from the outside. HP says, you do the process, you tell us what we're doing, you interview everybody and figure it out and report back to us. That's looking for a feedback loop of, okay, we're in the system, and so we're kind of blind and we may not be able to know what's really going on. So we're going to ask someone from the outside who doesn't know our culture to take a look at what's really happening. That's a very feedback loop system theory kind of approach. Uh, and so when we make a change, let's say we need to do a reorganization and we need to make a change, uh, we're going to say that, oh my goodness, we might need to merge these two groups together. They actually, we feel like it's a redundant, it's not being efficient. We want to merge these two groups together. We know we're going to need to keep, if we're making a change, that means the whole system will be affected. Everyone is going to be affected by this. And so we're going to need to come back and reestablish norms. We're going to look at flow of communication. What broke that we didn't even know, realize was going to break? We're going to be in kind of a complicated problem solving mode for change. Also, we're going to be really hesitant to completely lay off and delete a whole group out. If we take out a whole group, oh my gosh, we're wasting money. You're all out. And we're just going to cut that off. System theory is like, alarm, alarm, we need to, if we're going to cut out that whole group, this group is like, wait, I was dependent on that group to do my job. How am I going to do my job without that group here? Actually, that group was stabilizing this over here that we didn't even realize. And alarm bells goes off for system theory because of the network, and the informal social network, as well as formal processes that we've established, that once, when you're in the group, you're kind of invisible to them. You may not know it, especially if someone comes in with a classical management style. I'm going to go in and hit this button and I'm going to delete, delete, delete. All of a sudden, we are going to be in trouble, because we don't really know. We're like, and maybe someone will want that. Maybe like, oh, we don't know. So we do have to collapse everything so we can figure out how to be more efficient. Um, so that's part of that. Another belief part of system theory is that systems are interdependent with each other. That's kind of what I was saying. But the word interdependent or interrelated or interconnected are things. So when you're watching your movies, movies are, they're short stories, even those 3 hour ones by Martin Scorsese and Peter Brook, right? Those are still short, a short story. They're taking these huge epic tales and they're crunching them down. They're edited in a way for plot, so we have to kind of think about that. But can we see the complexity and the complicated pieces, and how are things interrelated to each other? Does the movie still show the interrelationship, or what themes are they interrelating? For example, I love to watch those Sheridan epic dramas, 1883 and 1923 are the ones that I've seen. And I also tried to watch Kevin Costner's Horizon. And Horizon was actually not doing this, which I thought was really interesting. Anyone who wants to talk about narratives on those, let me know. But the one thing about 1883 and 1923, they have these different storylines, especially 1923. They have a lot of parallel storylines. And when you get parallel storylines, he's still doing a system theory way of understanding the settling and colonization of the West, uh, with animals involved and with indigenous tribes, and even the difference in different tribes, but the interrelated relationships. And then you have the white colonization and the white settlers, and those different kind of ways they're settling into the West. And each, all of the way he tells his stories are very much system theory, because he's, even if there's separate storylines and you're like, are these people ever gonna see each other? Are we moving towards where they're connected? Maybe they aren't, but they're telling similar stories about themes of emotions and love and betrayal, and contrasting those from different perspectives is a very system theory storytelling method. Uh, so, in a system for that organization to work, that living biological system, it has to have a goal. And for it, and just like biological systems, when there's change, there needs to have adaptation. There needs to be problem solving. There needs to be systems in place for how to create feedback loops. And each feedback loop that we and perception checking that is done in system theory, it wants to create equilibrium. It wants to create uh, a stability, a stabilization that says maybe there's no one best way. There's no, in system theory says there's not best practices. We might have found the most efficient and best way for now, but as soon as there's a change, we have to recalibrate that fine oil machine and find that equilibrium again. And so system theory says there might be a best way to do it right now. There are better ways to do this than other ways. We're still never going to say this is the best practice. That is not really system theory language. Um, One way to think about this is sorry, I need to drink some more. I've been talking for a minute. I'm going over my hour. Okay. One way to think about it is, and corporations do this a lot, where they will have a mill or a factory and they'll take a manager, and they would say, okay, we're going to put you in the top position in this factory, and we're going to assign you to this factory here. And but then they only leave them there for like 3 years. Maybe they come in with knowledge from this other factory they were at, or this other mill, and then they come in here and they say, okay, I'm going to now make you more efficient, and I'm going to tell you the best way to do this job. Oh, that's very much like human. I feel like it's very coming out of classical, traditional management, classical management styles. It maybe you're lucky enough to have someone who's interested in human relations to step in to at least talk to people, but sometimes you get someone in there who is just, I came from this other factory and we rocked it, and your numbers are poor, so I'm going to tell you what to do. And right, I'm going to lay down the line here, and that just sends the whole factory into this chaotic system, or the mill into a chaotic system. System theory is interested in, would say, oh my gosh, you can't, if you bring in someone else, they need to be curious. If you're going to really be a true leader in system theory, not only are you going to employ all that observing of human and talking to people from human relations, but you're going to want this curiosity of the flow of the process. What is happening in this place? And that each factory, even if it's part of the same organization, each site uh, has its own process. It has developed its own culture. And there's things that have, and especially if there's any union involved, it has its own separate contract. Your factory might have a separate union contract than this factory, and that needs to be considered as well. And so you can't just come in and lay off this group, or uh, change, merge these group, whatever the changes are that they want to do because they know the best way. But those that's that idea of I'm going to take a manager and I'm going to plop them into the site, but then they're only there 2 or 3 years, and then they plop out, and then they get thrown into another site, and someone else is coming, and they're constantly doing this, right? A lot of that is because a really large billion-dollar corporation, um, those CEOs are really interested in their board of directors and their stockholders and how are we going to make the most money. And they don't want too much human relations forming in one given site, because as soon as you start talking to your employees, as soon as you start knowing about their life work balance and what makes them separate, we lose, we get empathy and we get inefficient. That's kind of the belief structure of getting a manager to come in and just do a layoff. So these are things to think about management structures and organizations. And we're interested in communication that's happening in organizations. So we want to look at what is formal, what is informal, and hierarchies, power dynamics, and those, how are those relationships driven. So this lecture here is to help you moving forward with your movie report, especially your first movie report. But this is something we want to be aware of when we're going forward, because when we hit Cynefin theory, David Snowden's problem solving theory, it's going to get, this is not complicated, this one. Well, it's complicated, but it's about ready to get a lot more complex. I love the difference between complicated and complex. Get ready for that lecture coming up. All right. Really excited to meet with you all and see all your stuff coming in. And I look forward to talking to you soon. All right. I'm going to end this video now. Bye-bye.